Hey, welcome back to another Pop Culture SquadCast Live. How you doing, Mikey?
Doing swell. How you doing, Bob?
Good. We are now live on our third platform. We are actually live on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitch. This is our first broadcast on Twitch.
All right.
So it's been 2 weeks. We got some stuff to talk about. We have some good guests. Ed Catto is going to be here shortly. He's already in the green room waiting for us, and we're gonna get to him soon. And then later on, Jamal Igle is going to join the stream. We hope, and we're good to go. And Sherry wants to say hi, so we already have one viewer. We're
Hi,
good
Sherry.
to go. So for everyone who doesn't know, I'm Bob Harrison. I write and edit for PopCultureSquad.com. Mike is Mike Gold. Legendary figure in the comics community and the rest of the world in ways that most people don't understand, and eventually over the course of this we will get to some of those cool ways. I want to talk, well, first of all, I want to talk and let people know that anybody who is, I'm going to turn off this music. There's this cool music functionality that we have here, but that's too much now. I got to get rid of it. I like this background stuff, especially for people who are broadcasting and doing something. They can just automatically play music that's kind of already been sanitized in the background. I don't know if you could hear it, but
I thought I heard Volga boatmen. Maybe I'm wrong.
maybe. But for people who are going to be in the Chicago area at the end of March and early July, Reed is putting on their
March, April.
April,
May,
right?
Yeah, you went straight to July.
Oh, good. Yeah, awesome. That's a long time. That's how. Isn't that like a winter night in Chicago?
That's not no. That's it's not even a winter night in Anchorage.
Okay.
But that's a long convention.
It is long. It was long. It's been a long weekend. But so end of March. So it's March. I think it's March 31st to April 2nd. Is Friday Friday to Sunday. Mike and I will both be in Chicago at C2E2, and on Sunday, April 2nd, we're going to kick off the 40th anniversary of First Comics with the first road show that we're going to have there. There's going to be a panel. I believe it's at 3:45, if I'm racking my brain, but somewhere in the afternoon on Sunday, April 2nd at C2E2. So far, it's going to be Mike and I, and Joe Staten will be there. Alex Wald will be there.
Yep.
We're hoping to get Hillary Barnett to be there as well, and possibly Rick Oliver. So there'll be.
I don't think Rick can make it.
Okay.
He and I have been discussing the matter.
Okay. Well, hopefully we will convince Hillary to come as well, and there will be all the merriment and talking about the 40th anniversary of First Comics. Now, we're going to do this a couple of times, I think, this year at least. We're gonna end it up in Baltimore, and have a great show there. We're gonna hopefully get a bunch of people together, but
we're going to have pretty much, well, I don't want to say the whole original First Comics crew, but pretty damn close.
A lot of it. I was very excited. When we do get to Baltimore, I was under the impression that earlier in the year that Howard was not coming to Baltimore, but now I see that he is, and that's going to be great too. So, but I want to talk a little bit about First Comics while we have a minute. And I was reading a bunch of comics as I was talking. This is my pile to be put away or to be put in the database and then put away of the past couple of weeks. And I was looking at the topics, and I really feel, looking historically, that one of the things that First Comics did was kind of reinvigorate the non-superhero comic, because it gave it, first of all, there was a place for it. Somebody was publishing that. And I mean, non-superhero comics have been around for a while. There was, whether it's, the Shadow wasn't a superhero, and there was things that were things, but like the concept of stories that were not necessarily people in tights. And
yeah, it's still heroic fantasy.
Sure.
But it's not people in tights.
Well, there's
necessarily.
a lot of the comics that I read were heroic fantasy without people in tights. Even today, like a lot of the really good books that I'm reading, um, a lot of it stems from that. It's not, some of it is more slice of life, some of it has other things, but yeah, I mean, what was that something that you made a big choice to go to
Yeah.
not have costume superheroes?
Well, not to have the most traditional of superheroes,
Sure.
in the sense of the costume or a cape or a cowl or that sort of a thing. We came kind of close. We kind of fudged it a little bit with John Sable, and Reuben Flagg had a costume. He had a uniform,
Mm-hmm.
but I wanted to take it in a slightly different direction just to open it up a little bit. I have no problem with superhero comics. That's great. They're great. I grew up with them. Well, that and Mutt and Jeff. But, it's time to do something a little bit different. We had some stuff going on at some of the other young, new publishers. I'm still a big fan of D and Agents and
Sure.
a few others, and those are great books. Those are great comics. But I think it's more like The Rocketeer, which is like, okay, this is the type of story that you're used to, but we're going to take it further and down a slightly different path.
Right.
And open up the medium. Today, you can go to a comic book store and see 100 different publishers, 70 books a week, 70 new books a week, which is pretty much what we had in a month when we started First Comics.
Right.
And
For the industry.
yeah, well, for the American industry, and it was all pretty much the same sort of thing. It was really time. We had these comic book stores where people who liked comics would go in. People who didn't like comics were scared shitless of them.
Sure.
And it's time to sort of move the medium around a little bit the way it had been before. I've always been annoyed that that fandom, such as it is, does not regard like Harvey and Archie to be comic books. We don't talk about them. We don't talk about John Stanley over at Dell and they're all comics. It's words and pictures.
Right.
Let's see where we can take the medium for people of any age, and just like they do in Japan.
Well, it's interesting because if you think about it, there are legends in the industry that people today will point to and say, that guy, he was one of the best. And there are people who made their bones and did a lot of their work in non-superhero. People like Wally Wood, people like Alex Toth, who are revered beyond possibly what they've done. But again, if you go back and you find their stuff, you're not going to go, it's not easy to go find their stuff in superhero books of the 50s, 60s, 70s.
No, I mean, there was some and
Some.
a lot of it was really great. But look at Simon and Kirby. I mean, they went way beyond superheroes. That superhero feel was there in anything that those guys did, everything that those guys did. But, Boy Commandos and all the kid groups and stuff, a very 1940s thing. But, like the Bowery Boys movies and that sort of stuff. But it was different from your standard superhero comic. This medium is exciting because we can tell any type of story, and it's sad that in America we have to overcome the superhero thing. People who are tired of superhero movies, which are mostly movie critics because the box office is still great.
Yeah.
But the movie critics who are annoyed with this now, it's like, how dare they take over? Well, okay, that's kind of cool, but I don't think they realize how many of the other movies that they see, and they're paid to see, are also based on comics. They're just not superheroes. So what's your problem? The costume?
Sure.
Give me a break. Without costumes, Steven Spielberg would be out of business.
That's true, but like even so so they are also complaining about the genre, I think, as much as I think they're complaining about the genre, and they get lost in the medium, right? Which is most people's,
Right.
like Amy Chu is great because, and I know she didn't coin this, but she preaches, it's not a genre, it's a medium. Um,
That's right. She's absolutely right. Amy's right about a lot of stuff.
right.
I take some responsibility because I met her in Baltimore at the Harvey Awards,
I know that's a
and
great.
she was just trying to break into the medium at the time. She was learning how to get into the medium, and we had a long conversation at the dinner, and I've been following her career ever since, and I have no right to any sort of paternal pride in it, but I'm so happy for her. She is so good,
She is
and
very very good.
she's worked for every minute of it.
And again, like the point I bring up is that she understands the medium. She understands what its capabilities are, what other mediums have other the capabilities for, and she branches to where they are. I wanted I want to switch gears just a little bit before we get to Ed. Something that I didn't realize until like about a half hour ago when I was doing some prep. So Superman Space Age 3 comes out today or tomorrow.
Yes, it's out.
It's out. Have you read it already?
No,
Okay.
I
So,
have it.
but we're gonna let's discuss because I know it means a lot to you, and it kind of falls into this. Like it is definitely got a 60s, 70s, and I guess this one is probably has an 80s feel because when I was talking to Mark Russell about it, like this issue, they're supposed to kind of move decades. Um, in the concept of what the story is. But what was it about this book, Superman Space Age by Mark Russell and Mike Allred, um, that really, struck you?
Well, I can only comment on the first two,
Right.
but as you know, and I may have said last time, I'm a big fan of Marx. I'm a big fan of a number of the writers who have come down the pike the last decade or so. There's some really good writers out there, and Mark is clever, which is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
He's funny. He knows what he's talking about. He's willing to take risks, and he delivers. He delivers a good time for me. Now, I'm a big Ahoy fan, which brings us to our main guest tonight. But I think that's seriously his work is seriously cool. So I'm interested in his take on anything. Superman is one of those characters where you can go do sort of a prequel type of a story because DC's continuity doesn't exist anymore anyway. So what the hell?
Right.
And this is good stuff. So if I'm entertained, and that's the first thing. I mean, maybe I'm intellectually showing some improvement after I've read a story, but mostly I'm there for the entertainment. And he's an extremely entertaining writer. As for the art, well, that's a patented style now. You know what you're getting, and I think it's fun. I think it's great.
Yeah. I
The
mean,
the two together on a project such as this, that's one of those Beatles situations.
right.
The 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 equals 5.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that Mike is the perfect guy for this story.
Absolutely.
That and there's something about Mark. So here's an example. Two. He's one of my favorite writers. Tom King is also one of my favorite writers.
Me too.
But I would not. It would be very difficult for me to see Mike Allred on a Tom King book, as opposed to how easy it is for him to be on a Mark Russell book. And I say that
I
because
understand that.
there's a certain level of elasticity to his characters that fits the permanently tongue-in-cheek method of Mark's writing. Like there's always something that is below the surface, whether it's a joke or a dig or a social commentary that's always there, and it plays well with a design that is not meant to be, Lee Weeks with rain coming down on Batman's head. And so that's why I said I think they were the perfect pair. And when I talked to Mark about it, it came about during COVID. They were, I think Mike lives in Eugene, and Mark's from there, and he had gone home to there, and they kind of got together and were talking about it, and then that's how it came about.
That's Eugene, Oregon.
Oregon, yes.
Yes.
Is there another Eugene?
I have no idea, but I know people named Eugene. So.
Oh yeah, they were. We don't need to go there. We don't need to. We don't need to. This is a family show.
Okay. Yeah, the Addams family, but yes.
Yeah, that's never mind. We can delete this. So anyway, yeah, that's great.
Have you told Tom what you just said? Have you ever mentioned that to Tom King?
That I wouldn't want Mike Allred to draw his stuff?
Yeah, because I think that Tom...
I think he would be offended.
No, I think he would see it as a challenge.
Oh, he definitely would. He absolutely would. And
he'd find the right obscure characters.
Well, I mean, the Elmer Fudd story is one of the greatest issues.
That motivated Neil Adams to animate it. I mean, you can't get a better compliment than that.
Sure, absolutely.
And it was worthy. It was such a phenomenal story. Jeez.
So, I think we're gonna bring in Ed a little early because he's here and he's like in the private chat, like in the green room. He's like, hey, how about this? How about this? So let's get him in. So, without further ado, we're going to introduce Professor Ed Catto.
That's true.
Who is welcome, Ed?
Hi, it's the big boy table now.
Yeah, you. So, for those who don't know, Ed writes With Further Ado, which is a weekly column at Pop Culture Squad. It is the longest running consecutive column at popculturesquad.com. I think we're at you're coming up to 250s in a couple of months, I think.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah. So
it's time for a real job, pal.
He also teaches at Ithaca College. And we're gonna get to some stuff. We're gonna talk about Ithacon pretty soon, but I want to let's jump into this first question you have. So you were
wow.
Listen, I have to turn my phone off, but that means that I either got an email or somebody sent me a TikTok. But you're working. So I agree with you. Ed sent me a message that says he's working on an article for Evangeline, which was published by First, but that was after Mike left.
Right? Yes, I wanted it. There you go. I wanted it desperately. I really liked the property.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. It was one of the projects that I was annoying people about because otherwise I just have to find something else to annoy them with. And ultimately it came to fruition, and I'm very glad because, I wanted to read it. There are projects that I want to work on really badly or people I want to work with, and that would probably have been true here. But, I'm a fanboy at heart.
Yeah.
So there. So there. Yeah, I'm glad that you had that. That's what a remarkable coincidence.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe it's one of those series that I think was very hot for a while and then was kind of forgotten. But it's basically like a a spaghetti western in space, but Clint Eastwood is a nun, and and all that makes sense when you read the book, though.
That's true, but if that was a Hollywood pitch, it would have been great to see everybody's reaction.
I would have that. That is true.
However, let us remember that Jeanette Kahn, after she was president of DC, publisher DC, became a movie producer and worked with Clint Eastwood, produced at least one of his movies. So,
oh, cool! I didn't know that. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to. We're gonna get to some stuff, but there's something that I want to bring in, and we're gonna like one of the things we do, and this, like I said, this is. Oh wait, hold on. We got a comment. We got Dino's in the house, and he's saying hi.
Hey, Dino.
Dino will be on our next broadcast in a couple of weeks, so watchers and stay tuned, and we're gonna talk to Dean about some cool new stuff.
Wait a moment. Dean says he's doing COVID cop in Florida. Well, I didn't know that was legal.
Well, we'll have to get into that later on. But,
we'll hold it for when Dean's here.
We'll hold that for when Dean comes in and visits.
Oh man!
But I
must know more about COVID cop. Love it.
All right, I'm gonna share a window here, and so this was something that was in a recent issue, and I don't know if you read it, Mike, but so Ed went and found in an old Charlton book.
Oh, I wish I had it handy. Yeah.
This guy. Well, I have two of the pages that you included called the Mercury Man, which I completely agree is very similar to the Surfer, to the Silver Surfer, and it's just hilarious to look back at. But like, it's interesting. Like there was so much stuff that happened at Charlton that people. I don't know that. I mean, I don't know what their numbers were. I don't know if you ever talked to Dick about them.
Oh yeah, a lot.
But
also, I live near where they were.
Okay, so like there's so much that came out of Charlton, and people at the time, I don't know whether the time were people reading it or was it just the comic book people who were reading it.
Well, we can get into some trouble here. Probably not. They're all dead.
That is true.
That's what we're expecting, Mike.
They're all dead. It's okay. Charlton was created in prison. The guy who was this is true. The guy who was publisher of Charlton had a cellmate, and they were like talking about it. Now they had these presses, and they had to keep these presses working. Because presses are very, very expensive, even though Charlton was arguably the cheapest operation in the history of everything.
Well, I mean, it was all typeset lettering, right?
Not all, but most.
Yeah.
It was machine lettering.
Yeah.
Wasn't necessarily typeset, but it was pretty cheap, and the page rates they were giving guys, and we're talking, Denny O'Neil and Steve Ditko and Jim Aparo, and I mean, just a wonderful group of people. The page rates, it's like how much you got on you right now, and but they were given a certain amount of freedom because I don't think anybody in management was actually reading this stuff. They were selling the books by the pound. Very few of them went through what we considered at the time the traditional newsstand distribution business. A lot of them were sold in a box to like toy stores, and you'd go to that toy store and you'd fiddle your way through the box. Sometimes the box would be like 3 months old. So if you're a fan, you're a collector, that was fun,
Sure.
They had good talent. They had some of their war
really
comics.
Talent.
Some of their war comics were some of the best war comics around. That Joe Kubert didn't draw, and and they did some really phenomenal stuff, and I know because I bought one of them. I bought all of their books, but not all their books. Just Married. I think I missed, but I bought a lot of their stuff. But at First Comics, we bought E-Man and then gave it to Joe.
Right.
So that
wait, you bought E-Man and gave it to Joe?
Yeah. Well, not me personally. First Comics did.
But they bought it and gave it to
It was
Joe.
my idea. They didn't.
So Joe didn't own E-Man?
No. Charlton owned it.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So we bought it from them.
Sweet. Such a nice thing that you did.
Like, Ed, see, this is the thing. Like, this is why we're doing this, and we're going to keep doing it, and hopefully people will come and listen to us. But you talk to him, and then all of a sudden you get this. Like, he bought E-Man for Joe. That's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. It just
Joe, Joe presents himself like the world's largest puppy dog. Now,
Sure.
now, in real life, he's not always like that.
I believe you.
But he's always fun, and he's been a friend of mine through thick and thin since like 76.
Wow.
And between my first tenure at DC and the creation of First Comics, he was one of maybe 3 people that I took into my confidence to explain to him what First Comics was supposed to be all about. In his case, in order to entice him to come over as our art director, because I thought it would be a good idea to have somebody with some experience who knew what he was doing. Chaykin was another one who I brought into my confidence, but Howard was retired from comics at that moment in time. I'm very happy to say it was our bringing First Comics to fruition that made him reconsider that position.
Yeah.
I am happy you did that too.
So is he.
That's true. He won't tell you that.
Oh yeah, he will. He's very good. He's very open about it. He had this fabulous idea. I mean, I've been through so many pitch sessions. I could be a ball player, but that one, it was like, and I was a big fan of Howard's work. I was a fan of Howard's work before I met him. Something else he doesn't understand. And he pitched this idea to me, and I probably was drooling by the time he had finished his pitch. And I think it was in the lobby of the old Congress Hotel in Chicago, which is extant. Very old, though, the turn of the century. Teddy Roosevelt was once arrested in front of the place for speeding in his horse-drawn cart. And he was president at the time. Now, how's that for a start?
Wow. Did you buy E-Man and give that to him too?
No. No, it was just a teddy bear, and, but it looked like him.
Oh, man.
So Ed, since we have you here, let's talk about With Further Ado just for a minute. And
sure.
It's I'm close to it because I edit it weekly, and
thank you, by the way.
No worries. It's a pleasure. It's part of one of the enjoying things I have in my week. And but you're
fix the rest of your life, Bob. If that's the best part.
Look, I've done that too. I've edited Ed as well, and they don't pay me by the column I edit. But if they did, and they said, "Look, we got to cut something here," I would have done it for free.
Oh, you're very kind.
You know what? Because one of the things about Ed's column, about With Further Ado, that I always enjoy is that there is this unbridled enthusiasm that comes through about whatever it is you're talking about, and even when you're talking about something you don't like.
I try and stress the positive, but yeah, there's stuff I don't like, and this next column I talk about why Jack Kirby's so rotten, right?
Well,
And I
there
was
you
like,
go.
"Ooh, can I
What?
do this? Can I do this? And how do I pull it off?" And there's some reasons why in this particular column, but yeah,
Holy crap!
yeah, right. And
That's
I'm a
pretty
big
good.
Jack Kirby fan.
I am too.
Yeah.
I know a couple of people, including a former columnist that we had worked with, who don't like Jack Kirby,
Oh, really?
and
Don't
and
like
I
Jack Kirby or don't
don't
like Jack
hate
Kirby's?
his work,
Okay. Yeah.
and I mean that's fine. I mean it's an aesthetic thing. That's great. If you don't like it, you don't like it, and that's cool. But I don't understand that. Jack Kirby was probably the first guy whose work I recognized. I didn't know his name because they didn't sign the stuff then. I knew Wally Wood's work because he signed everything.
Mm,
But in terms of the unknown artist, when Jack took over Green Arrow for a year,
right.
these little like 5-page stories, and some of them were fantastic. All of them were good. I mean, were really good stuff. And at a point in time when superhero comics were rare, few and very far between.
He's in Detective Comics or Green Arrow.
It was in the back of
I think World's
Advent,
Finest or Adventure.
Adventure and World's Finest. Yeah, it flipped over from one to the other
Yeah.
during that run. Yeah, it was great, and I was so happy when DC, did a trade paperback of Jack's stuff. I had actually put one together for DC because I was editing Green Arrow, so I thought I could shove this into the schedule somehow. There you go.
Exactly.
There you go.
Perfect.
But I couldn't.
Brilliant.
So later on, somebody got away with it. And
Oh,
I'm proud of them, whoever it was.
So, so one of the things that you'll also find in With Further Ado is Ed and his trips to local comic shops and trying to find that. And it's funny. We had I texted him over the weekend because someone was telling me about. Here's the ironic thing. I had two things related to Ed's columns. One was there's a friend of mine who's a comic book associated person, and he lives up in upstate New York now, and he's been going to different comic shops. I'm not coffee shops, and trying them out and go. They drive a little bit and go whatever. And then I thought about the one that you had told me that there's this coffee shop / gaming shop, but I wasn't sure if it was how far west it is, and it's out in Buffalo, so it's probably too far for him. But I was sitting there and I was getting tattooed this weekend, and my tattoo artist's brother lives in Rochester, and we were talking. My tattoo artist will be on an episode of the Pop Culture SquadCast interview edition sometime later this year. We're going to get together and talk about the intersection of tattoo and comics, because we were best friends growing up. Huge.
Get a hold of Mitch. Get a hold of Mitch O'Connell.
Okay.
Ooh.
And he said, "Oh yeah, my brother by my brother. There's this store that has you buy cereal and there's comic books in it." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know that. Ed told me about it."
Yeah, great. Great little Rochester shop. They closed, they reopened. The guy's the guy's very creative. It's like a cereal bar, so you can order the cereal, but like at a bar with alcohol, you can mix them. Like, oh, I'll take a little Cocoa Puffs and a little Captain Crunch, and yeah, it's hilarious. It's so fun.
Is there like a weed store next door?
Believe it or not, there's an axe throwing store next to it.
Let me tell you the coolest juxtaposition. This is Jerry Ordway is from Milwaukee, and obviously his studio was in Milwaukee before he made it huge. And I would go up to Milwaukee from Chicago for parties over at his place a couple of times, and it's an hour and a half drive, and his like office neighbor, the office next to him, was a private eye, real bona fide
Cool.
private eye, who also did lie detector tests.
Cool.
And was philosophically very contemporary libertarian. So the conversation was a little dicey, but it was just one of the most amazing times because there was all these comics people and we're all talking about stuff, and here's the guy who did that stuff. So
Yeah.
that was
love
cool.
it.
Yeah.
Love it.
That's cool. I want to open the floor to Ed. So things are getting a little hot and heavy, a little getting the wheels going for this year's Ithacon.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the crawl. Boy, that crawl looks so beautiful.
Yeah. So well, Mike and I will be there. I'm some of the kids, I've been talking to them, trying to do what I can to guide their paneling stuff and see if we can get there. But tell the listeners about what can they expect at Ithacon, and where does it come from? Because I think it not only is one of the oldest Comic Cons, but it is one of the most unique. And go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Ithacon. I'm associated with it now, but I have a long history. But I've been formally associated just a few years ago. It's the nation's second longest running continuous Comic Con. San Diego, we all put an asterisk for COVID,
Right.
Although we did do it remotely. And San Diego is the longest. Number 3 is really Shelton. Shelton down in North Carolina does a fantastic job as well. He's
a hero's con.
Great person.
Yeah.
And Ithacon is the second longest running one, founded by a guy named Bill Turner, who's still involved with the show. This is a show. In fact, right now we're doing an infographic of all the guests. I'll tell you, it's like this who's who of people who've come through Ithacon. I mean, recently luminaries like Bob Harrison and Mike Gold.
Of course.
In the old days, it was like Reed Crandall, Kurt Swan, Murphy Anderson, Walter Simonson, Alan Milgram, Len Wein, Marv Wolfman. Just like every big comics professional that you love, it seems like they were there. Kaluta, everybody.
And this is the what show? 40.
Oh, so we're number 46. We're not counting the online one as a real show. So we're 46 live.
So your show is about as old as my daughter, who's involved with this pop culture squad thing.
There you go. Absolutely. Yeah, amazing.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. So the show.
I was 4.
Yeah. And then
you got over it.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, I think I went to the second one. I might have gone to the first one, but I think I know I went to the second one. Like I saw a flyer in the department store, and we were a few towns over, and I begged my parents to take me, and my brain exploded. I was just at that point where I was like learning about creators, and I could recognize some styles, and Walter Simonson was there, and he was like kind to me as a little kid, although now I realize he's kind to everybody, but he's a sweet person. And man,
not everybody.
And that was from last year, of course, 45. Now
this is last year's.
Yeah. And so it's continued on. And in recent years, and like while San Diego has gotten very big, and Shelton's done a fantastic job making his big, but feel very intimate as well. This show, much like the town of Ithaca, always wanted to be very, very neighborhoody and very small. And it still is very neighborhoody and very small. So, when you go to this show, there's not a lot of super long lines, although part of that is, we managed not to have long lines, and you can really talk with creatives and, really enjoy yourself. So this year, thrilled to have you guys there. We'll have the fine folks from Ahoy Comics, one of Mike Gold's favorite publishers, come. And last year they were on board to come, and everyone got COVID the Thursday before, so that was a little weird. We had Ahoy without Ahoy, but we
Well, we
faked
were
it,
Ahoy.
right, fellas?
We were Ahoy.
Yeah, we did the Ahoy panel for some good
Yes,
reason.
it was great. We did a better job than they would have done, I think.
Exactly.
Oh,
They
yeah,
have
sure.
A lot to look up to.
My only qualification was I read their stuff.
Yeah, and you did great.
Yeah.
You did great. Yeah, and
But I
so
want-
we're always
missing
thrilled
it.
with the fans who come. We had the dealers last year. We had one fellow who's been an exhibitor for years and years, and he said this was the best single day I've had. And he had come to Ithacon a few times. I said, "Oh, at Ithacon?" He said, "No, this is the best single day I've had revenue-wise in 30 years." Right?
Wow.
Wow.
That's great.
So we get the real deal kind of comes through Ithacon. And in recent years, it's become, and I think this is what you were getting at, Bob. It's we've merged Ithacon with Ithaca College, one of the colleges in the town of Ithaca, and we use it as a learning experience to help students understand how trade shows and conventions work, especially in relationship to starting a business or being in business. And we run a class. So students come into this class and they learn about pop culture and comics and everything to do with it, but they also learn how to run a show. And, I always say this is not like, my uncle has a barn, let's put on a play. This is like, we've been doing this thing for 40 some odd years. Let's do an A+ level with this show. So it doesn't seem student run.
It doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. But definitely, they work super hard. Seeing them last year.
They work very hard. Just well managed show.
Yeah, thank you.
We've all been to much bigger shows, not older but bigger, that are not as well managed by tenfold. I mean, just horribly managed. It seems like they don't give a damn. And the folks at Ithacon and Baltimore is the same way. The Baltimore Comic Con is the same way, and there are many others, but not, the really, really huge shows are run by people who know the stuff and they understand the passion, even if they're not comics fans, because you teach them, but they understand the passion. And that's what it's all about. And that's what the lousy conventions, I don't want to say lousier, they don't get that. They think it's about money. It's not about money. The money comes from the passion.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, for this class, in fact, we get about half of the students are comic nerds. The folks who love comics, and they'll talk about the new comics they got. And the other half have no understanding. Oh yeah, I've seen some of the Marvel movies. And then when we get them together, that's where the magic happens. And they all become super passionate about the endeavor and take it very, very seriously. And Bill Turner, the fellow who founded it, is still involved. Bill works way too hard on the whole show. And he's a great guy. And we have so much fun. And, I think the dirty little secret, half of it is putting on a good comic convention. The other half is having a party on the weekend, inviting all your favorite friends like you guys.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the way to do it. I mean, I was one of the guys who helped start the Chicago Comic Con back in 1831 or something. And that's what we did. I did the programming for the show from 76 to 85. And my programming was, okay, these people are popular. These people will bring in people, will bring in the fans, and these people are friends of mine. And if you were on all three lists, you were there.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it.
So I want to talk about something else. I had something else on this list. but I'm gonna keep you on, Ed, and we're gonna bring in our next guest
Oh yeah,
because
super.
for some that's appropriate because for some reason this show feels kind of super and super heavy and Supermanish. I'm dressed for the occasion,
Love that. Sure.
but
Yeah.
but we're gonna bring in our next guest because there's some good conversation and there's some things that you have both said in the past that I kind of want to give you guys the opportunity to talk about. So without further ado, as opposed to Ed's column, we are going to. I'm going to bring in our next guest. Hi, Jamal. How are you?
I'm good. Hi, guys.
Hey, Jamal.
Welcome.
Hey.
It's good to see you.
You too, Mike. You too, man. Hey, Bob.
Good to see you, Jamal.
Welcome. So let's talk about Superman for a minute. And before we get into, we're gonna talk a lot about Jamal. We're gonna talk about some stuff, but I want to talk about Superman because in the comics and in outside of the comics, he's been a topic lately. Let's get to Ed's comment really quick, and we're gonna get to the other one. But Ed's comment was in a recent With Further Ado, we talked about in a very dissatisfied comic book fan. Oh, they're taking my thing from me. Getting upset about the undoing of the secret identity. And it's a very interesting comment. It's a concept that happens in comics all of the time. In my lifetime, probably not in Mike's. Like things happen. Things have now like because they could just say this is an imaginary story and we're not going to talk about it again. But like by the time it got to Crisis, and they said this is the law, this is the continuity. And then when they start going back and forth and undeading and bringing people back and all of that stuff, it gets upset. Like you convinced me, and Ed was upset that he had been convinced that it's a good thing for Superman's secret identity to be out there,
Right.
and now they've undone it. What does the table think of this? And
I blame it all on Jamal.
It's entirely possible.
And we had Philip on last week, and we kind of talked about where it came from and how it worked out and his take on it. I'm sure it wasn't necessarily his idea. That's something that's superly comes from editorial, but
Right. Well, my take is that when they made the initial announcement a few years ago, when Bendis was writing the books, the first thing I said is, this will be undone the moment somebody else becomes the main writer of the series, because that's just the way things are. That's the rule, especially in long form narratives. You get to break the toys, but you got to reset them for somebody else to come and have a clean playing field. So, hi, Sherry. I never liked the idea of his secret identity being taken away from him. I feel like, and I've always felt like that is such an intrinsic part of what makes Superman work as a character. And
The triangle.
Well, not just the triangle, because the triangle. I mean, they've been married for 30 years at this point. The love triangle is not really as essential. I love that dynamic.
I agree.
I continue to love that dynamic. But I also love what they've done with Superman and Lois as a couple as well. They've made her a fully fledged partner in his life, which is important if you're going to write those kinds of stories. But at the same time, and this is the classist in me when it comes to everything Superman. I mean, anybody who knows me and is even follows me on social media knows that Superman is the character that got me into comics in the first place. It's the character that I've spent, my career at DC chasing and then finally getting the opportunity to work on. So, that overall, that the idea of, Clark Kent as the observer of the world, participating in the world, but not truly a part of the world, but wanting to be a part of the world, wanting to share who he is normally, as opposed to being Superman, who is the aspirational figure, right? And the thing about Superman as the aspirational figure is that the people of the Earth look up to Superman, But at the same time, for me, I always think of Superman as like the ultimate first responder. Superman's entire mission comes down to one sentence, which is, "I'm here to help."
Right. So it's interesting because that justification you just gave is exactly the justification that Lex Luthor gave for taking away taking. That's exactly what
Jamal Lex Luthor.
He's like the way that, and I think
Never saw them together.
I think Josh Williamson wrote it, but the concept was that Superman. He told Superman, you can't be one of us. You have to be above us. So we can't have the rest of the world knowing that you're just one of us.
But I think that was more jealousy than anything else.
It was jealousy, but it's still the same point.
Yeah,
like
you're agreeing with Lex Luthor, isn't that an issue?
Well, you know what? I kind of had the same, like, to take it back a little bit, I kind of had a similar reaction when they revealed Peter Parker's identity as Spider-Man back in Civil War. Now, I thought, like, the writer in me, I would have just had, like, the next issue of Spider-Man open in the Daily Bugle with just, like, a series of flashbacks and Jonah slowly seething, going, "Peter Parker and Spider-Man?" Like, just the entire, just, like, every single, like, spider's flares, his, rescuing his son, saving him from Scorpion, like, all of that stuff. And just, like, slowly losing it over the course of an issue. Because that's funny.
Yes.
That idea is hysterical to me.
Well, so I agree.
Great.
That's a great point. Like, because we've done this before. We've done this with Spider-Man. We've already seen it. And the putting it back in the bottle,
right,
continues to have ripple effects that are uncomfortable.
Yeah.
With him.
My only problem with all of this change and then undoing the change, I agree with everything that's been said here about particularly Superman. Superman's more than a character. He's an icon.
Right.
He really is American Pie. He's the hot dog of superheroes, but he's the guy that you look up to, and he's the guy that we as readers should look up to.
Right.
But once you take him out of that box of a secret identity, same thing with Peter, you're jerking the reader around by undoing that part because it's so magnificent. Oh my God. Now everybody knows that Clark Kent is Superman.
Listen, and I agree that line, "My name is Peter Parker and I've been Spider-Man since I was 15 years old." I still get chills just hearing that.
Right. Yeah.
But I didn't want it to happen, and I wasn't,
The coolest thing about Superman today, however, is that he's also defined by his relationship with Batman. This did not used to be the case. Batman is not an icon. He's a threat. He's a threat to the bad guys, but he also scares the good guys. He's a scary dude. And when Clark and Bruce, no matter what they're wearing, are having a conversation, they speak from those two perspectives and they learn from each other. And that's a nice little bit. That's
I
a
think
that's a
I
really
think
good
that's
bit.
a nice little bit. I also feel like they're, as much as they want to like each other as people, because I think there is a genuine respect. I think there's a genuine a like between the two of them. There is that wall that is always going to separate them.
Yeah.
That the one thing that Clark is that Bruce is, Clark's bulletproof.
Yeah.
You know, ultimately, if Bruce dies, it's on him. You know, if Clark dies, it's on the rest of the world. You know, Superman having the position that he has in the DC universe as the line in the sand for the Earth, for the greater galaxy, against Darkseid and Mongol and Brainiac and the Khans and all of these other intergalactic threats. Ultimately, we lose Superman, and although depending on who's writing it, we'll never lose Superman at this point because he's functionally immortal. But the idea of losing Superman probably scares the hell out of Batman as well.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that. I agree. There are Batman protocols to make sure that Superman stays I'm sure he's done a lot of things to make sure that to protect him and take things out of the way, because he wants to make sure that if he's missing something, he's gonna Bruce will cover.
But then go ahead. Sorry, don't mean to take over your show.
No, it's the Jamal part.
Listen,
I'm upset to hear you, but I've just got to say that I surprised myself as a hyper traditionalist for embracing that revealing of the identity, and a couple of things that like made me I think every book should be World's Finest 183 or something.
Right.
But a couple of things that made me think about it is in today's world, it's fine that every little kid knows Iron Man is Tony Stark in the real world and in the in this the cinematic universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's oh yeah, you don't need to do that hiding away thing. And then the other thing is I don't think Batman should give up his identity, or everybody should, but Superman is all about the truth and telling the truth, and Superman never lies. And I would, in the real world, if I had a favorite columnist and I realized he was lying to me for 15 years about something big, I'd be like, oh, son of a gun, all those stories you wrote, were you lying then? Or, oh, those were real, but the other thing was a lie. I just have so much trouble with that. And in one of Wade's recent World's Finest, the crux was it, I think Robin said at the end, well, this happened because Superman never lies. And, I'm reading it, I'm like,
right.
Yeah, he lies except for that one big thing, and that's kind of chewed its way into my adult brain way more than
I
get
that. The thing that
it's good.
I appreciated what they did with the reveal, and I thought it was handled very well. But again, there are bigger pieces to that I guess in terms of narrative and time, you really couldn't explore. I mean, it would be boring to most people, but it would be interesting to me, is that there are probably hundreds of criminals in jail, not because of Superman, but because of some expose that Clark Kent wrote. How did Clark Kent get this information? Did he use his powers? Is that even legal? Is he he's Superman, he's operating as a vigilante, but then he's also reporting on it as well. So, it's sort of like every time Daredevil gets his identity revealed or almost revealed, Matt Murdock should have been disbarred years ago. Not just disbarred, but banned from performing law anywhere in the United States.
Right. I mean, we see that in real life all the time, where like a cop will be revealed to have been a bad cop, so they
Right.
have to undo all of his stuff.
Yeah.
All of his arrests, and all that, and there's a greater harm to society from that perspective, but we deem it a still greater harm. This will disappear soon, I'm sure. A still greater harm to have cops, people in authority lie like that, manipulate like that,
Right.
and steal like that, because
Right.
Clark is actually stealing when he's using his X-ray vision. So there are real world overtones to it, and I'm really glad that I was able to say all of that without once saying the name Tucker Carlson.
There you go.
All right, so I'm going to ask a question. I already know one person's answer. Trunks or no trunks? Because this is what Jamal brought up recently, or pointed at. So I told him we were going to do this. So apparently there's been some discussion of the James Gunn reversion, and the question is, will Superman and Superman Legacy have trunks or not?
Yes, he will.
He
Yes.
should. I think
Absolutely.
he should.
You think he should?
Absolutely.
First of all, yeah, it's kind of stupid to have your trunks outside your pants. Okay. But I get that. But the whole Superman thing was the circus strongman. That's where it started, and that's what gave him the cape. And quite frankly, the cape is a dumber thing.
as witnessed by The Incredibles.
Well, but also, when they made the first Christopher Reeve movie, they had 14 different capes
Yeah.
for different purposes, for different scenes, for different environments. And that just shows you how silly Superman's cape is. However, you see Christopher at the end of the movie flying over the earth, and it looks magnificent. And that's what counts. That's what counts.
Absolutely. And it's just Superman as a character, even in this modern time, should be should be a bit of an anachronism. He should be a throwback. He should be kind of out of touch, not out of touch emotionally, but like out of step with whatever notions of relevance, both narratively and in the real world, because there's this need whenever somebody comes on to a Superman project, most Superman projects, not all, but most of them of the last few years, to try and make him relevant and hip and modern. And that's not who the character is. He's an old-fashioned guy. He should have old-fashioned values.
He grew up in Kansas at a time when Kansas was more conservative than it even is today, and that's saying a lot. Yeah. His values, we all get some of our values from our environment, and that's how he grew up. So, Jamal, you're absolutely right about that. Yeah, you're absolutely on the money on that.
And it's interesting now in the books how he's kind of embracing so much of his dadness. Like, I think the thinking was for years, if he's your dad, you don't want to read his adventures. So let's put him in jeans, or George Perez, New 52 reboot. But somehow
but now
it's working now. And everyone
now he's got his 3 kids. His younger brother, his younger cousin. His best friends are
7 Supermen
in metal suits. He's got these, the adopted, Superman from China hanging out. He's got an entire team all dressed in, cool jackets. And,
I did
make my family dress like me.
I did a column about that at Pop Culture Squad a couple of weeks ago, and essentially what I said was, if you're not a member of the Superman family or a member of the Batman family, chances are you're a member of the Green Lantern Corps,
Right.
Or Flash, because there's 1,000 people. We have the CW to thank for this, but there's 1,000 people in Team Flash. There's 1,000. I mean, there's literally 1,000 people in the Green Lantern Corps when I last read it, because I got confused and I went away. But I would like to see a little more originality. Having said that, when they gave Clark and Lois a kid when John was born, I thought, wow, that's probably not going to work. What was it, Dan Jurgens, I think. It worked marvelously. It worked phenomenally. I couldn't believe how brilliantly it worked. What happens to the character? I was very pissed when they just aged him all those years. Not that they should keep him whatever he was, 8, but I want to see how he developed during those years that he was gone. But aside from that, he's a good, solid character. So my complaint about the uniqueness being undermined is, at least in part, full of shit.
Well, they also have the problem.
Yes.
The problem of whenever...
Did people read that?
Everybody saw that. Everybody saw that.
Okay.
Well, they also have the problem, as I was saying, of whenever they introduce a new version of a character, they introduce John as Superboy. People are wondering, well, where's Connor? Connor just disappeared. You're never going to have Connor around again. So they bring back Connor. So suddenly you have 2 teenage Superboys. You make one Superman, you send Clark off to fight Mongol on War World, but there's still, now that he's back, there's still 2 teenage Superboys. Older teenage Superboys, because when they brought Connor back, he came back with a 5 o'clock shadow. He did. He did.
No, you're right.
When they reintroduced Young Justice,
Well drew him.
But yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same thing where and it's kind of the same with the Flash. I mean, you got Wally, you've got Ace, the other Wally, Ace. You've got Bart, Impulse. You've got Iris, who's also Impulse now, apparently. You got, Jay, who I forget, I think it's Surge, is what they're calling him
Something
now.
like that.
Yeah.
And then there's a Lady Flash. There's a couple of Lady Flashes, too.
Yeah, there's a couple of Lady Flashes, and you still got Jesse Quick. You still got...
and Linda has powers now, too.
Yes, Linda has powers now. And then you still have Jay. You still have Max Mercury.
Right?
If you go into the future, you still got John Fox. You've got all these members of Team Flash who
Tornado
are
Twins.
still around. Tornado Twins. And the thing is everybody has a favorite. Everybody has a favorite character. They don't want to see that character put away on the shelf. So how do you utilize those characters? How do you incorporate all those characters? How do you give them all a moment in the sun? It's kind of like the same problem that you always have whenever somebody tries to do a reboot of Legion of Superheroes. Like, how do you do
I think
Legion?
you should try it.
Listen, if DC said, hey, Jamal, we will let you write and draw Legion of Superheroes. I know exactly. If you're Kyle Rayner, you pick whatever color you want.
We just bring in Mark for the comic.
No,
really.
Because I have an idea for Legion, but nobody would like my idea for Legion.
Oh.
So,
Maybe it's time. Crisis, and I liked Crisis, and I wish they stuck with it as opposed to invalidating it by the time the last issue came out.
right.
The one bad thing in my brain that Crisis did was it totally invalidated the Legion. It made the Legion impossible. And that's a shame. First of all, there are a lot of people who like the Legion, and to have them just sort of doddering around. Yeah, there you go. Ed's one of them. To have a lot of people doddering around saying like, "Oh, I don't know what we do. What year is it?" That's sad. It's a good concept. I'm old enough to have, and precocious enough to have bought that first Legion story off the stands. So I
Superboy.
know.
It was in Superboy, right?
It was Adventure Comics.
Oh, it was an adventure.
And I thought it was the coolest. I was like 8. I thought it was the coolest comic book I had read in my life. No, I was only 8.
When I remember reading it, and I thought it was pretty cool, because that was one of the first like reprinted old comics I ever read. Because that was one of the things that you could get that first Legion story, and it was like, and it's been redone so many times as well. But that first story was just the coolest thing, and it's in. Like, we could talk about Legion superheroes for like 5 hours without breaking us.
Hey, listen, I came into Legion superheroes of Great Darkness Saga, so
yeah, me too. I mean, we're about the same age, Jamal.
I remember my first Legion was probably one of the worst stories. It was a backup, I do believe, in World's Finest, and 2 of the Legionnaires like go away for a mission, and they come back, and all the characters are gender swapped. So like Cosmic, remember that one? And I remember reading it and not understanding it, and asking I swear to God, asking my grandmother, like, what is going on here? And she looked at, like, I have no idea what this nonsense is you're reading. I can't help you.
And that's how you became woke.
That's correct. That's what comics are all about.
That's right.
I kind of want to I want to move this along. Because we have Jamal here, and it's not something, I want to kind of talk about your work, and some of that kind of gets there. I'd like to talk about, and I know this will make the other two very happy. Can we talk a little bit about Wrong Earth and where you're how was that presented to you, and what did you think about when you first heard it? Like, how did you want to go with that?
Okay, so basically the way this happened is Stuart and Moore and I live in the same neighborhood, and we both frequent the same bakery.
Really? Now this is a true comic story.
This is a true comic story. So there's a little pie shop near my house called 420 Blackbirds, and I was walking by with my dog, and Stuart was walking out, and we're chatting, good, like a couple of minutes, and he goes, "Hey, listen, I was talking about you with Tom Pyre, and he's got this idea that he wants to pitch you. Would you be interested in listening?" And I was like, "I've never met Tom. I'm a fan of Tom's. I would love to hear, what he's got in mind." So Tom calls me up and tells me to pitch over the phone, and I was like, I'm in, absolutely, like on the phone, just like, done, I'm in. Just the pitch was just very simple. It's like, I've got 2 versions of the same vigilante, absolutely hate each other, and they swap universes and they swap villains, and I was just like, okay, all right, I can see this. I can definitely see this.
That was also a Super Friends card.
Oh, yeah.
That was the plot to one of the best Super Friends cartoons ever.
Really?
I know what episode you're talking about.
You know exactly what episode you're talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
So the Wrong Earth was created by Hanna-Barbera, by Filmation.
In a way, when you think about it, actually, it's really funny because initially, Stuart and Tom were thinking that they were going to have to get 2 artists to work on it.
Oh yeah.
And
one schizophrenic is fine.
Well, I mean that is truly one of the triumphs of the book. To be honest with you,
The title, the name of the book is so perfect.
Oh yeah.
But the fact that it could if you told somebody it was two different people, they would have believed it. Absolutely. And that's a tribute. Absolutely.
Thank you. I know I worked very hard and still continue, and will continue once we get started again in a couple of months. It was very important to me, both visually with the characters themselves and with the storytelling, how things were laid out, the world building, because it wasn't just a matter of trying to have two different feels. Because I could have drawn the whole thing the exact same way, but it was very important to me that everything, down to the rendering, down to page layouts, down to the pacing, felt different. That, while there was a similarity between both, like if you really get into it, like with all the Earth Omega characters of all the Earth Omega segments, if you look at like the figures themselves, I took a lot of influences from Jim Lee. I took a lot of influences from Greg Capullo, real Tony Daniel, just trying to get that kind of like hatchwork and heavy shadow and atmosphere, like angle certain bits of the figures, the heads, like make things a little bit sharper, make the world of Earth Omega dirtier and grittier and more hardcore. With Earth Alpha, I started thinking about like my favorite Batman artists, like, the people who influenced me, like, Aparo and Alan Davis and Don Newton, and trying to make it clean, but not just like the figure work, but the storytelling. The storytelling for Earth Omega is always widescreen, black borders, tiered panels. Earth Alpha is very much classic comics layout. Characters pop out of panels. It's circular insets. Like every little like trick that I have learned over 35 years of working professionally. And the same thing when they go to Earth Zeta in Wrong Earth Night and Day, like I went out of my way to try and make Earth Zeta as different visually as I could from Alpha and Omega, down to like the panel borders that have the circuitry pattern and the borders. All the clothing is based off of like all these funky like haute couture fashions, lines that I looked up. Like I do like a ton of research. Like Earth Alpha is filled with all of this like 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s concept technology that was never produced. Everything in there is like, it's real. It somebody made like a concept of it. The flying suits in Earth Zeta are based off of old like concept marine diving belts. We've all seen the diving bell suit with like the giant head. I just like put little jets on them and gave them heads up displays and just took it that one step forward. The Dragonfly Man's Dragon Wagon is a Nissan concept car.
That's awesome.
I keep forgetting the name of it. It's like a Nissan 1200X or something. I keep forgetting the name of it. But I saw that car years ago and was like, that would make a cool Batmobile. And always had it in the back.
You had the opportunity.
I had the opportunity. So it was like, you've got to have a car. Let's give him the Dragon Wagon. And then when I was designing, Dragonfly's version of Dragon Wagon. It's like, what would be like the most ostentatious version of Punisher's war van that you could come up with? Like giant bubble windows and wings and like big, like it's basically like a troop carrier,
Right.
on mag wheels. So like it was, everything. I try to give everything, the same kind of verisimilitude that Richard Donner always talked about when he described the process towards Superman movie. And I try to do that with all of my work in general, but I really, really wanted to. This gave me such an opportunity to dive in deep and kind of work out all of my, kind of various thoughts on various versions of Batman.
Right. It's interesting. I found it very interesting when you listed artists, because to me, Aparo is my Batman, like my first Batman. And again, we're similar age and I think consumption.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that. I get that. It's interesting because as we're talking about it, and it's kind of what we were talking about before, and I don't know if you were in the green room yet, but we kind of we're talking about Superman Space Age that Mark Russell's doing, and we talked about the concept of like if it was like a Lee Weeks versus Mike Allred, and that's basically what you did. Like one of them was Lee Weeks and one of them was Mike Allred, and it kind of works together. And but besides the visual, language that you developed for it, the story there, the concept that Tom kind of came up with, and how you were able to put that together. What about telling that story at Ahoy and what Ahoy does was special for because it really was, it launched and it hit big. It's very rare that a small startup comics company can get something like that is enough to give them the claw hold to be around for 5 years now.
Right. Well, one of the things, honestly, was in that initial conversation with Tom, one of the things that I discovered was that Tom and I have very similar senses of humor. We both find the exact same things hysterically funny. And
oh no, there's two of you in the world?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's the crux of the biscuit.
And reading Tom's scripts are a joy because of that. And honestly, one of the first things, like after I agreed to come on to the book, one of the first things they sent me was the first issue of High Heaven.
Love that story.
And I saw, Stuart and I have known each other we worked together at Firestorm, years and years and years before. Like Stuart, was at my bachelor party. Stuart, we're friends. So, but I know Stuart, and I know, the care that Stuart puts into his work. And when I saw the package that Ahoy was putting together with High Heaven, I knew that this was something that I wanted to be involved with. So I had no hesitation. And, being able to work on something like this, where, honestly, Ahoy really is, one of the best companies that I've had the opportunity to work with in a 30-plus year career. Hello, Kitty.
He is unsurprisingly named Grayson.
Oh, it's easy. It's all, they're good people.
Yeah.
And
Well, they had me with Stuart and Tom.
right.
Right, that alone. That was like, oh, let's see what these guys can do.
Mm-hmm.
And they've not disappointed me.
No, absolutely not. I don't think there's been a single Hoy book that's come out that hasn't been an absolute winner. And I think part of that is because they curate the line so carefully.
Yeah, it's also those little backup stories. They got a couple of really, really good artists on those little backup things.
Yeah. I like that.
Let us note that Ed has done. How many illustrations have you done for them now?
Oh, each one's a joy. Jeez, I don't know, maybe 10 or a dozen.
Wow.
I don't know. I love it.
Yeah.
So such a gift. Yeah.
They only let me do one.
I'll show you how it's done someday, Jamal. I'll give you that.
That's perfect.
Jeez.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad you have it on, Jamal. And I want to talk about something that it's a story that you've told before. So for people who know you are going to hear this, but for our listeners, I was in the comic shop a couple weeks ago, and there was a whole new collection in there, and a bunch of long boxes, and there was a Supergirl from just before you took over.
Right.
So I know you told the story before, but I'd like you to tell the story, and the reason for it, I think it's very important, because I picked it up and I'm like, oh, I know where this is coming from, and I told the story to the folks there about you when you took over Supergirl, and can you talk about that and what it means to you as a artist?
Oh yeah.
Being given the task that you were given, your feelings about it, and how it relates to like you being not just a comic book artist, but a person and a father.
Well, yeah. Well, when Matt Adelson first approached me about doing Supergirl, I was working on Tangent Superman's Reign, the miniseries we were doing, and I was actually enjoying it. I mean, I was having a good time. It was weird how it happened. So I'm in Chicago at a signing, and Matt calls me up, and he's like, we need an artist for Supergirl. Would you be interested? And I was like, well, I mean, will people be upset if I like just suddenly leave, this Tangent series? It's like, do you want to really be drawing Tangent, or would you rather draw Supergirl?
Right.
Fair question.
Yeah, So my first question was, okay, so who's writing it? And he said, well, we got this new guy. His name's Sterling Gates. Like, Sterling Gates? That can't possibly be his real name. God, I swear to God, it is his given name, Sterling Gates. Lovely guy, just the sweetest guy in the world, and super talented. But
whoa, yeah, we lose more hosts that way.
Exactly. We need another Timmy.
Wow, that was cool. And now the cat appears behind the microphone.
Exactly. The cat has now left the building. So let's talk more about Sterling Gates.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, well, let me see the script. So I get home, and Matt sends me the script, and I start reading the script, which is what ended up being Supergirl 34. And I'm reading the script, and it's like, holy crap, this is good. Like, this is really good. I'm like, I almost never show my wife scripts. It's like, baby, you got to read this. So this was when DC was still in New York. And so I go over to the office to meet with Matt just right before I start drawing the book. And the first thing that Matt says to me, two things he says to me, is like, have you been reading the book up until now? And I was like, no, not really. It wasn't really my thing, because I had started reading it when they brought her back and Jeff Loeb was writing it.
Sure.
And I quickly lost interest because I felt like it wasn't for me. I felt like it was trying too hard to be edgy. It was a 40-year-old guy's idea of what an edgy 16-year-old girl is supposed to be. So, if they had her get tattoos and candor, and making out with a guy who looks like her cousin, it was just weird, just a lot of weird stuff going on in that series. So I really couldn't get into it. And he was just like, okay, so don't worry about reading any of that stuff. And the other thing he said to me was, I never want to see Supergirl's panties again. And I was like, okay, I can do that. So I went home and I bought the trade of the last trade before I started working. I still actually have it on my bookshelf. And I'm flipping through it because, I need to see what's going on, in the book. And, at one point, my mom and two of my nieces were here. And Rio, my kid, was 4 at the time, like 3 or 4 years old. And I'm telling my mom that I'm going to be taking over Supergirl. And I show her the book, the trade. And the first thing my mother says is she looks like a hooker.
Right.
And
that's her job. That's a mom's job.
Yes, that is definitely a mom's job. But that kind of began my thought process. And then talking to Sterling kind of cemented the plan that we ultimately came up with for the book. As we've been talking about this since I've been on the show, Superman, the Superman characters, they mean a lot to me. I did not necessarily know at the time that I would become so invested in drawing Supergirl. And I became very, very invested in Kara and who Kara was as a person. My approach to drawing Kara became presenting her as a normal girl.
Okay.
As a normal 16-year-old girl who woke up one day after being shoved in a rocket ship on an alien planet, being told you have to go protect your baby cousin. You wake up, your cousin's not only older than you, but he's Earth's greatest superhero. You now have powers too, and somebody gives you a costume and tells you you're going to be in the family business.
Right.
So our approach was basically like, she's still trying to figure all this stuff out, but she's trying to do the right thing. Like, she cares. And that was what that entire, first couple of issues really were about. Especially, once her parents come back, she's fighting this internal battle between what it means to be Supergirl and what it means to be, Kara Zor-El, but still wanting to have a normal life and trying to have one as Linda Lang.
Right.
And
so I think it means a lot. Like I said, it was a very important part, and I think you made a difference in the tapestry of the character. And I say that because after that, for the most part, she has been treated with a little bit more respect than she was being treated prior to that. And I don't mean to disparage anybody who was writing or do it.
Right.
It just felt like her level of there was a time in Supergirl's life before Crisis where she had raised she was an equal, she was
Right.
a full-fledged member of the superheroing community.
Right.
I mean, the issue of Legion of Superheroes when Brainiac knows she died, like that's one of my favorite issues of Legion of Superheroes. But then after Crisis, when they had to figure out how she could have come about, that people had lost her until then. And when you guys took over, I think it made a big difference. I think when they came to doing the show, I think that there's part of your effect in that when they did the Supergirl show. What do you since we're talking about people with, how they're going to look in stuff, what do you think of how the Supergirl looks in the Flash movie?
Well, it's a different take.
Oh, it's a different take. It's a different take, obviously.
She actually looks a lot like one of the versions of the characters that they did in the Injustice comics.
Okay, that's true.
The black hair and everything, which is fine, and I understand like this is their version instead of doing like the Superman Project version from Flashpoint. Right. They're doing this. I have not seen enough. I think it looks fine. I have to see,
Well, I mean, there's as much
you
as
got to see her in action.
Yeah,
sure. I'm a big fan of. I'm excited. That's one of the things I'm most excited for in that movie because I am a big fan of the actress. And I think that obviously there's some level of. It's coming from the Snyderverse, so there's some level of the design that's kind of comes from that. But I'm excited for that opportunity for people who don't watch CW to, get an experience. I mean, and listen, a lot of comic fans will watch the CW.
That's fair. No, what you said is totally fair.
There are plenty of people who don't know who Supergirl is because they don't watch the CW. And I'm super excited for the Supergirl movie too.
Is that still happening? Oh yes, right. Yes, that's still happening.
That I'm more cautious about. Because
were you a fan of the story? Did you read the story?
I did read the story, it's always odd to me. I know it's not going to be a direct translation. And unfortunately, a lot of what they end up doing with Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow is going to be based on Superman Legacy.
Interesting. Sure.
Because you have to establish that version of Superman before you can move on to establishing who Kara is going to be in the overall narrative of the new DC extended universe.
It's going to be interesting.
It's going.
What's a fate? Okay, listen. So what is your? We Mike and I talked about this in our last show, and Ed, you're here too, so I want to hear your pick. Like we have this list, and I'll get it up. I think I have it here. Let's put this up so we can all see for a second.
Well, you can see it.
Hang on.
Okay.
All right. So what do you got? What do you like? What do you like? What do you hate? That's the purpose of the Pop Culture Squad. I mean, we talk about what's fun, what's good, what we like, what we don't like. What do you like? What do you hate?
Okay. Well, so far, Superman Legacy sounds promising from the way that Gunn's been talking about it. I'm really excited by the Authority. Actually,
thank goodness.
Because
I am too.
Because if they really go back to doing like the original Authority,
that's what I'm thinking.
That could be really, really good. Paradise Lost, I'm not a big sword and sorcery guy, so like Westeros via Paradise Island doesn't really excite me as much. Lanterns could be interesting. I've actually always argued that the mainline Green Lantern book should be much more of a police procedural.
Mhm.
They've done it.
And that's what Grant did with it recently.
Yeah.
It was kind of like that. And I think Lanterns is very exciting for me. And I've said this before, but like I think that is going, and kind of the way there's certain ways that James talked about this whole slate, and when he made that first video, there was certain tells that I got, like Lanterns is going to be really important. Like it's going to be important for setting the stage for a lot of stuff, and I hope it does well. I would love to see it as a police procedural. I love to see some heaviness to it. Like it would be some interaction between. I just don't want, and I've said this, we kind of said this before, but I don't want in volume 1 or chapter 1 of Gods and Monsters, I don't want a color war here.
Right.
Let's build something.
Oh God, yes. God, yes. There can't be a faster way to confuse the masses.
Yeah. Let's leave that alone for a while. I do have to say, I really, really want to see Booster Gold. I really want to see Booster Gold. But there is one thing that is not on this list that I personally would have put on this list as a priority. If you're going to do Waller, you have to do Checkmate.
I think they're going to show up there.
Yeah, I think you have a spinoff here. Yeah. I'm looking forward to Waller for one reason. Well, a couple, actually, because she's a wonderful character, brilliantly performed. But my major reason is because I want to see Todd McFarlane have to make a John Ostrander in-action figure.
Listen, we are all praying for that. Every night before I go to bed, now let me just see. I want a John Ostrander figure.
I'll buy 2. I love
it. So Ed, what do you like? What do you like? We haven't talked about it.
The one that I'm so amazed at is Batman Brave and the Bold. If they do, it sounds like they're leaning into Damian Wayne, and I'm so interested to see what America, or the world beyond comic fans think of Batman and his son, who's such a little rotten kid. Like that, I think that could be so much fun. And like even the recent Batman, the Batman was kind of like, okay, great, more of the same, someone's take. This seems like it has to be very different.
Oh no, it absolutely has to be. But the thing about Damian as a character is I hated Damian as a character originally, and the psychotic little SOB grew on me.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
He really did.
Yeah, and we were all sad when he died for a while. I think you hated him, and then you missed him.
You know what this reminds me of, though? His character reminds me of how he posts work on Spooky, the tough little ghost.
Yeah.
and I'm actually being serious here. So you may want to write the time down. But
first for everything.
Yeah, but Spooky was. I mean, he's a ghost, so I guess he was a prick. I mean, a nasty little prick who wound up doing the right thing. And I kind of like that.
So you asked for it.
So, anybody looking at the screen or my screen knows that Damian Wayne is not my favorite Robin, and he grew on me as well. Of course, what started to make him grow on me was when Dick was Batman and he was Robin, and that was some great stuff. And he is at his best when he's with Dick, to be honest, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I've read him other places, but
I think that there's a lot to that.
I think the promotional image they used,
It was Dick
that,
it was Dick in the Batman suit.
but that's probably reading too much into the tea leaves.
I think
that
that's
would
just
be
people
really
don't know.
cool.
Well, my favorite Robin is Nightwing,
Yeah.
but Jamal, I got a question for you, and
Okay.
and this may sound a little odd, but Molly Danger
Mhm.
is a book I like a lot, almost as much as I like saying the phrase Molly Danger. Where did that come from, and did you hear from the Jimi Hendrix estate?
No, I have not heard from the Jimi Hendrix estate. No, it honestly just I was in a car ride with a friend of mine, and we were talking about ideas, and it basically started as like, if we were gonna do a kids cartoon, what would we do? And we were bouncing around ideas, and we settled on, because this was around the same time, this was 2003 initially, so this was around the same time that, they were doing the Life and Times of Juniper Lee and Atomic Betty and Kim Possible. Right. So, we're bouncing around ideas around, and the name Molly Danger just popped into my head. And, my friend Rich was like, oh yeah, no, she's a teenager. It's like, no, she's 10. She's 10 years old. She's a 10-year-old superhero.
Did anybody in the car scream Eureka? I love the series.
Thank you.
I mean, when I saw you at whatever convention, I said I really like your work, and that's where it started.
Thank you. No, Molly is, she's one of my babies, obviously, and
you see what Mark says, Mark Allen Fishman.
Thank you, Mark.
There you go.
Molly is absolutely one of one of my babies, and Molly. It's hard for me to talk about Molly as a character without getting like really, really emotional about it, because it's not just Molly as a character, but putting together the series as a person for me was really important, because I had spent the last few years prior to working on Molly at DC on contract, and really wanting to start writing. I wanted to start writing, and I pitched stories. I can say it now because I think the statute of limitations. I had actually rewritten several books, including dialogue, uncredited, while I was at DC.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Happens a lot, actually.
Yeah. And I, towards the end of my contract, it was really becoming more and more abundantly clear to me that this thing that I had, one of these things that I had put aside to concentrate on just being a penciler, was really, really scratching at the back of my brain. Like the writer in me was really like starting to come back and claw its way out of the darkness and say, you have ideas, pursue them. You have things that you believe in, put them into a story. So doing Molly Danger was a cathartic experience for me, more than anything else. I don't want to say it was like a purely a creative exercise, because it wasn't. It was an idea that I kept like in the back of my mind and in sketchbooks and in notebooks and various other sundry places for close to a decade before I ever even got a chance to actually like start writing page one.
But that's where really good storytelling comes from. It comes from your heart, from your soul, from your blood. You know, that's where it starts. It starts inside you somewhere. Otherwise, you're just hacking it out. And boy, that's a good place to start.
Well, the thing about it, and I think you guys have all had this experience too, where you're writing something and sometimes you just want to get to a joke, and you've got 30 pages to go before you can get to that joke.
Yeah.
And for me, like the entire setup. So there's a scene in Molly Danger. I'll describe it for the listeners. There's a scene in Molly Danger where Molly's chasing the super speedster named Flip Scott, and she's chasing him across the city. Molly has this ship that's called the Molly Mobile. It's a magnetic it flies via magnetic levitation, anti-grav, and all these other fancy science stuff. And she has a pilot who drives the ship. So they're chasing Flip Scott. He runs down this parade route, basically, where it's surrounded by people with banners. So Molly comes up with this plan. She tells her pilot to stop short so that she flies past Flip Scott, grabs the parade banner, and pulls it tight, and basically, trips him by the neck, That's the setup. We go to the next scene. Molly's getting chewed out by her commander. I told you not to do that. What were you thinking? And Molly says, I was thinking mass times velocity. Nothing made me happier than to finally sit down
and write those words. Exactly. That's great. That is great. Yeah. And it's, I agree with what Mike was saying and how, and what Mark said. I love Molly Danger. I think, I'm so happy you did it. I'm so happy for you as in your career and for you as a person that you were able to do that. Cause I think for me, it felt like you felt like that was a really important turning point. And I think it came true that it was, that's
absolutely.
That it's not often that people that like, oh, this is the thing that's going to do it. I need to do this thing that probably it's going to be really scary and it might not work. And a lot of times it doesn't work. Right. And I think you evolved because of it in very impressive ways.
Thank you.
Let me tell you how much I like Molly.
All right.
About a half hour ago or so, I was beginning to get concerned that we wouldn't get around to Molly Danger.
It's on the list. It is on the list.
Well, I just popped right out through it, and
I appreciate you did. I
couldn't take the risk. So,
no,
thank you, my friend.
No, thank you. I agree with you, Bob. Molly really was. It was a turning point. Is for me creatively, and it was a turning point for me personally, and in a lot of ways, like professionally as well, because I was able to take the book and show it to editors and publishers and say to them, not just, hey, look, I wrote and drew this. I conceived the whole thing. My wife and I did the entire production. We hired the creative team. We managed everything. We did this. But then, coincidentally, I was able to say to other people in the business, hey, I actually used to work in advertising. Hey, I actually used to work in marketing before I started drawing comics full time. I wasn't always a comic book artist. I do have a business background.
Right.
But not just that. But creatively, it made me rethink my approach to my work in general. And it made me actually go back and start to relearn the things that I had put to the side as an artist, because I was just concentrating on, like, my goal at DC for the longest time was I'm just going to be the best penciler that DC Comics has ever seen. Right? That was the goal that I fixed in my head.
Sure, noble.
But I had stopped inking my own work. I had stopped coloring my own work. I had stopped even thinking about really writing anything. And in the old, almost 11 years, since I left DC, and since I did Molly, and since I've done The Raw Earth and Deadly Datsun and Kiss and Microface and everything else that I've been worked at Action Lab, doing marketing, doing all that other stuff. Like, I relearned how to write copy. I relearned how to digitally color. I relearned how to ink myself. Now I'm a teacher. It's just like all of these things that I knew how to do, but for whatever reason decided to segment and like put away, because I was just doing this one thing, and I think that I was doing it well. I certainly learned a lot, while I was at DC, and I had a lot of great opportunities while I was at DC. But I knew that I wanted to be more, than just a DC Comics artist. That was a goal at one time. But there's a certain point where your horizons have to go beyond, just doing one thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's your obligation as an artist, and I don't mean artist as a guy who draws. I mean
Right.
as an artist. It's your obligation to yourself.
Oh no, absolutely. I have found more satisfaction from being able to say no to things, which is a big part of it. Is, having the ability to say no, but having the ability to just do things for fun, which is a big part of it.
Yep.
Right. So let's talk about, like, we've talked about a bunch of your past. So Dudley Datsun.
Yeah.
Which I think it's about to wrap up.
Yes.
You're probably done with it by now, right?
No. I'm working on a double-sized issue right now. So
good.
It'll be out in April.
Yes.
Yes. So we have a
The latest
32-page final issue coming out, at least for this cycle.
Right.
And then it will be out in print from Dark Horse later this year.
So what's that been like? How have you enjoyed that experience?
It's been fun. It's been a lot. I mean, again, it's all of it's feeding into. It's another project that feeds into all of my weird world building sensibilities.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing a series about a teenage genius who's got a watch that allows him to travel through space and time, and he's teamed up with a robot dog with the brain of Daedalus. Yeah.
Makes sense to me. I mean, why not? I really appreciate you. I really appreciate you deciding to do this with us, and hopefully we'll get you on again. And we're going to talk about.
It's been fun. It's been great.
It's great. Like this has been perfect. A really good. And for anybody who's been listening, thank you if you've been listening for these 2 hours or so. But this is what we want Pop Culture SquadCast to be about. We want it to be, we're gonna definitely spend a lot of time talking about Mike's everything, and but
everything.
Listen.
Not the stuff that the statute of limitations is still in effect. You got to carve that out.
I think you've passed all of them because you didn't ever murder anybody, as far as I know. So like that one.
But how would you know?
Yeah.
Why do I have to question this? Anyway, we're gonna talk about Mike. We're gonna talk about pop culture. We're talking about what's going on in the movies. We're talking about what's going on in TV and what's going on in comics. And so we've talked about Ithacon. So we know Ed's gonna have Ithacon coming up in April, and we're excited about that. Mike
Jamal,
and I,
will you be there?
I think I will be. I have to check.
okay.
Part of that is I have to see if a certain Mr. Ellis is going to be home.
Sure.
So if he's home, then I can crash at his place.
Yeah, that's Steve Ellis, a fantastic artist in his own right, who's also one of Jamal's great pals. And,
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, they have a nice time together.
Yeah,
So-
he's the older brother I never knew I wanted.
So that's the magic of this field.
Very true.
So many of my friends, my closest friends, came out of comics, and so many of my closest friends that weren't in comics, well, a few, I brought into the field. Because, who wants to be alone, right? So I worship this field, not for the product, which I love, but for the people.
Yeah.
And I agree. And it's been an amazing, for me to do what we do. And this is, like I said, we're going to talk about fun things. We're going to talk about what our opinions are. We don't always agree. But subsequently, Mike and I, we're going to be at C2E2. Hang on a second. Mark has some more comments, so I want to get these out here. Here we go. This is the latest one. Mark might be right. It's going to take a while.
I'm a septuagenarian, pal. We better get it while you can.
We got one more. There you go.
Yeah.
So there you go. We're going to be at C2E2. We're going to talk about some first comic stuff there. I'll have another panel there, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And we're going to have we're going to have multiple guests on going forward. Next show is going to be on March, I think 9th. We said it's going to be. We're going to move to Thursdays for the month of March because we're going to put on some special events on Tuesday nights in March related to Women's History Month, and I hope I'll have some more. We'll have some more details about that coming forward for all of our listeners.
That's great. Can we get some women to actually write for the site?
Listen, anybody's welcome. We definitely would love to get that. So anybody who's listening, please reach out to popculturesquad.com. And
can I? Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Can I plug something real quick?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We love plugging stuff. What do you got?
So I am on the planning committee for the High School of Art and Design in New York City. Is having a comic book convention on April 29th and 30th called Fanfare NYC. They've been doing it since 2019. Last year was a virtual. This is the first year that we're going to be in the building. We've got a lot of really good guests coming up. The whole thing, all the proceeds are going to the PTA, the High School of Art and Design PTA. And part of what they do at Art and Design is that they provide not just school supplies, but art supplies for all of the incoming students every year.
Great.
So amongst other things, they sponsor trips. My kid Rio goes to A&D. I'm an A&D alumnus as well. So this is I'm really a big deal. But we've got some big name people that are going to be on the list. So there'll be an Eventbrite and stuff going on soon. But it's April 29th and 30th at the High School of Art and Design.
That's great.
Cool. You had Neil Adams there a year or two ago, right?
Yes, before he passed. And we're actually planning to do a memorial for Neil at this year's show.
So cool.
Yeah, I used to see Neil the day before the Baltimore show would open, during setup. And every year we'd have this conversation. And that stopped. That stopped because of COVID. And then, of course, Neil died. And I am so gratified at all of the attention and all of the history and all that Neil has done for this medium, both creatively and politically, as in Siegel and Schuster, but many others. So I just wanted to get in a little, political rap, because otherwise I would never do that.
Right, exactly. Of course not. All right. Well, like I said, our next show is going to be on March 9th. We're going to have Dean Haspiel on, and we'll probably get somebody else in as well. And that should be a good time. And thank you guys. Thanks, Ed. And thanks, Jamal. Hopefully we'll have you both back on again another time.
Anytime.
Thank you.
And we certainly appreciate it.
It's great hanging out with you guys for a couple hours. I had a great time.
Oh, I didn't mean to get rid of you. We let them out. So
it's okay.
So we're gonna do Dino next time. He's got something cooking that should be announced by then, and
He's got a lot of things cooking.
Well, he does. He
Always.
He absolutely does.
He is a true bon vivant.
Well, I will create a special banner. Dean Haspiel, bon vivant.
Bon vivant.
All right. Well, thank you for tonight, and we'll get ready to do it again.
Thanks to all the folks out there in computer land.
And one of the things we will talk about, and we're not going to spend. This is not going to be just a Superman based show, but we are going to talk about Superman Space Age by the time we come back next, because we will have been able to read it, and I've been super excited about it.
And we can talk about it behind Mark's back.
Well, maybe we should get Mark on the show.
There's that.
All right. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Bob.
We'll talk to you later. Thanks, everybody.
Take it easy.